Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this February 12, 2015 edition of Nightcast. Talks on the future of Greece's debt repayment have been very constructive, the country's finance minister has claimed. Members of the new Greek government and Eurozone representatives met for hours in Brussels, but the head of the Eurozone finance ministers said detailed proposals were not discussed.
This was my first Eurogroup meeting. It was fascinating. We had a very constructive and extensive discussion of all the facets of the Greek crisis and the way in which the Eurogroup can facilitate the transition to a new phase in the history of the Greek social economy so that we overcome the debt deflationary crisis, the humanitarian crisis, and so on. We heard many different interesting opinions. We had the opportunity to table our views. And now we are proceeding to the next meeting, which is in a very few days on Monday, hoping that by the end of that one, there's going to be a conclusion to the deliberations in a manner that is optimal from both the perspective of Greece and our European partners.
Okay, and friends, I noticed our audio, we had a problem at the beginning. It was only playing on one channel. I was able to get over and see that we had a loose connection and put it back together. We are pulling all of our equipment out of the racks and reworking it, and we've got some new equipment. We don't have all the cables, though, so we had to put it back the way it was until we get our new cables so we can begin to use some of the newer equipment that we have. Okay, Finance Minister Yanis Varoufakis, who you just was hearing, told reporters that he hoped for a conclusion to the talks at the next meeting, as you heard him say, on Monday. Now, this is Thursday, so we've got the weekend and then Monday, and as to how that'll go, we do have some more stories that may give some insight as to how that might go. Here is the European, well, let me give you his title in a moment. Here's the lead-in, and it'll come up in this. Intense talks on the future of Greece's debt repayments have been constructive, according to our news lead here from the BBC, but detailed proposals have not been discussed. The head of the Eurozone finance ministers has said, you'll hear him speaking in just a moment, members of the new Greek government and Eurozone representatives met for hours in Brussels. Now, we're saying the same thing here, but they're meeting, friends. They didn't reach an agreement, and both sides are hoping by Monday, when talks resume, that some agreement will come then. This is Jeroen Dijsselbloem, who told reporters that the talks had made progress, quote, but not enough progress to come to joint conclusions.
We had an intense discussion and constructive, covering a lot of ground, also making progress. But not enough progress yet at this point to come to joint conclusions. No, we didn't actually go into detailed proposals. We didn't enter into negotiations on the content of the program or a program. We simply tried to work on the next steps over the next couple of days, making progress before Monday. Unfortunately, we're unable to do that.
And friends, in this next video, Mark Lowen, he gets in there with some of the people of Greece. While there's Fierce opposition in Brussels and Berlin. The BBC's Mark Lowen went to a fish market in Athens to gauge the mood of the Greek public.
The talks are underway at the summit in Brussels. They're trying to net a deal on Greece's financial future, although here at the Athens fish market, they're more concerned with reeling in the customers. But even here, they have politics on their minds, because many in Greece say that they have voted for their government. They've given them a big democratic mandate in the last elections in order to renegotiate the bailout and to end the painful austerity measures that they had promised before the election. And that's exactly what they want the Prime Minister to do in Brussels today. The Greek position is that Greece will accept most of the bailout conditions, about 70% of them, but they want an end to the other 30%. They want the austerity measures to end. They want humanitarian issues like to raise the minimum wage and to reconnect the electricity of those who can no longer afford power. They want to swap Greek debt for new bonds that will only be repaid once the Greek economy grows. The problem is that Greece's Eurozone partners aren't in the mood for compromise. Germany and others want Athens to stick to the pledges it has made in the past. So let's see what people here make of it all. Yanni is runs this lovely fish market, this lovely stall at the fish market.
Hello, hello.
Yanni, tell me, what do you think? Do you think that your government is going to be able to reach a compromise?
I have faith in our government, to Mr. Tsipras and Mr. Varoufakis, and I think that they're going to try their best to find a solution good, for Greece and its people,
Do you think that other countries want to compromise with Greece, though?
I'm not sure if they wanna compromise, with Greece, because until now I don't see positive solutions, positive thoughts.
Do you fear what might happen if they don't reach a deal? Do you fear, for example, that Greece might be forced out of the euro even?
I think that with our new government, we show to the Eurozone that we are not afraid anymore, and that we want just to live more peacefully and normally.
Okay, Yannis, thank you very much indeed. Now, at the moment, though, both sides are playing hardball. There's very little sign of any kind of compromise, either at the summit today or at the Eurozone finance ministers next week. And there's very little sign that Germany and others are willing to let Greece off the hook of austerity.
And friends, we go to Egypt next, where Sally Nabil reports on why everybody cheered today.
Everybody cheered in court when the judge announced that all the defendants will be out. The case has been adjourned until the 23rd of February. Mohammed Fahmy will be bailed 250,000 Egyptian pounds, nearly $30,000. But finally they will be out. There were lots of hope that the judge today is going to respond positively to the request submitted by the lawyers to release the defendants. Actually, before the judge announced his verdict, Fahmy gave a very emotional speech. He said that he had no other option but to renounce his Egyptian nationality. He said that he didn't ask for it, but he received a call from a high-profile official who told him that if he renounced his Egyptian nationality, he can be out because they want this case to be closed. He denied any kind of relation with the Muslim Brotherhood. He said that we didn't commit any acts of violence to be charged with terrorism. He said that Peter Grist is out and we are very happy for him, but we want to be treated equally. So today they have to wait until the 23rd of February when the new session starts to see what the judge has for them.
Okay, friends, now talk about Muslims. There's a story out of the United States that has some potential for international problems. The killing of 3 Muslim students in North Carolina has prompted anger in their community and online. Dia Barakat, his wife Yusur Mohammed Abu Salha, and her sister Razan Mohammed Abu Salha were found dead, shot in the head at home. Their family said the attack in Chapel Hill should be investigated as a hate crime, but the accuser's wife, who you'll hear speak in this video, said the attack was motivated by parking, not religion. reporter Regina Vadenathan reports.
Described by their friends as three winners who set an example in life and now in death. 23-year-old dental student Dia Shadi Barakat and 21-year-old Yusuf Muhammad had only recently got married. Her sister Razan Muhammad Abu Salah was also with them when they were shot in the head at their apartment complex.
Hi there, I'm walking through the Finley Forest apartment complex in Chapel Hill, and I just heard gunshots. I don't know what building it came from, but I heard kids screaming.
I heard a series of 7 or 8 noises, and I initially thought it was a car backfiring, but after the fact found out they were gunshots.
46-year-old Craig Stephen Hicks, who gave himself up to police, has been charged with their murders. On Wednesday, he appeared before a judge in Durham, North Carolina. Authorities say he's cooperating with them. Inquiries are continuing at this apartment complex, a short drive from the university campus. Police say that a preliminary investigation indicated that the motive for the attack was an ongoing dispute between two neighbours over parking. But the father of 2 of the victims maintains this was a hate crime. This case has generated a huge response on social media, with hundreds of thousands from across the world discussing the attack, many believing it was religiously motivated. In a hastily arranged press conference, Hicks' wife hit back at those suggestions.
I can say with my absolute belief that this incident had nothing to do with religion or victims' faith, but in fact was related to the long-standing parking disputes that my husband had with the neighbors.
Police say they'll exhaust every lead to work out why these students were killed. This video of Dia shows him raising funds for a trip to Turkey to help Syrian refugees.
Have you ever felt helpless about the situation in Syria and felt like you can't do anything about it?
Their friends say they were the kind of people who touched the lives of everyone who knew them. Rajini Vaidyanathan, BBC News, Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Friends, for this next story, I'm going to ask you to use your imagination just a little bit and maybe pretend we're going back in time. And it goes back in time to a Bible story. So those of you who may not be familiar with the Bible, you know, you need to pull your Bible off your shelf. Everybody should have a Bible. And if you don't, go buy yourself one or get online. You can find plenty of Bibles online. But we're going back to the days of Sodom and Gomorrah in my little example before this next story. I want you to imagine what life would be like there, both before God's intervention and after. Of course, after God's intervention, there would be no life there. And that's the point I want to make. God is very displeased with actions that would be defined as sodomy. And that's what, I'm not going to say you people, because I doubt that any of you people watching this, now maybe a few might stumble on here, and if you are, I hope you can hear clearly. God is not happy with the actions of people that He calls, the actions that God calls perverse in His Word, and which He says, and I'm talking about the God of creation, the God of heaven, who will intervene in world affairs. And you know, we have, if I, let's see, how am I going to bring this shot out so I can show you this? Well, it's going to change the shot on my screen. That's okay. I want to zoom out, and over my shoulder on this side, on the pictures on this screen behind me, we have a set of pictures. Let's see if I can get into the right ones here. At the bottom on the left side, you see looks like a thunderbolt, a lightning bolt, big bolt coming from the sky. Let's see if I can find a button. Yeah, here's a button that'll zoom in tight on that. And you see there's a statue there. Oh, that's the same statue we have in our studio virtually up above me here that we can zoom up on. Let's do that. Let's go up on that statue. And this is a statue that King Nebuchadnezzar, the first world-ruling king who's depicted by this head of gold. He saw this statue in a dream. And the dream concerned him greatly, the way God presented things in this statue in the dream of King Nebuchadnezzar. And so he called his magicians, and he wanted to know what this dream means. And the magicians they said to him, "No problem, King. Tell us your dream. We'll tell you what it meant, what it means." King said, "The only way I'm going to know you know the meaning of this dream, if you're in touch with your God that gives the interpretation, then he'll also give you the dream I had. Otherwise, all of you are being put to death." Well, that was going to include Daniel and his 3 wise men who had been brought up in the king's court, along with all the other wise men of the court and magicians and what have you. But one of the men in the court who had been in prison, I think it was the butler, had been in prison with Daniel back when the butler and the chief baker were in trouble, and they each had a dream. And Daniel interpreted the dreams of the butler and the chief baker, told the chief baker he was going to, have his head whacked off, he was going to be killed, and he was. But he told the butler, "Hey, you're going to be put back on the job. You're going to come out of here alive and be back on your job." And Daniel asked that butler, "Well, when you're back on the job, remember me before the king." The butler was very, very grateful and thankful to Daniel. And so Daniel asked him, "Hey, remember me when you're back before the king." And, well, butler gets out, forgets all about Daniel until the king has this dream some many months, years later. And then, but King Nebuchadnezzar, there was a guy I was in prison with that interpreted my dream, and it came true. So the king said, "Well, bring that man before me." And Daniel came before him, and the king said, "I heard you can interpret these things." And Daniel said, "Oh, no, not so, great king, not me, but there is a God in heaven who interprets dreams." And Daniel was given an opportunity to have time for prayer, and God gave Daniel the dream and the interpretation, which was that you, O great King Nebuchadnezzar, are this head of gold, and who has a world-ruling empire given to you by the great God. After you will come another, and you saw in the dream on this statue the head of gold, which is you, but then it had breast and arms of silver. And after you there will be another world-ruling empire, but it'll be inferior to you as silver is inferior to gold. And then there'll be a third world-ruling empire pictured by the breast and thighs of brass, and it'll be even less yet inferior. And after that, there will be a fourth kingdom. It'll be strong as iron, but it'll be divided, just as there are 2 legs on this statue. The Roman Empire was divided between the east and the west. And then on the feet of this great statue, it had feet partly of iron and partly of common clay. It's called miry clay in the King James Version, just really means, common clay, and partly clay and part common clay and partly iron. And the point there being, iron and clay don't mix, so they won't get along. Even on the same foot, the kings and kingdoms from the east, they don't get along with one another. And the kings and kingdoms from the west, they don't get along with one another. And certainly the east and the west don't get along together. And yet, these 10 kings, depicted by the 10 toes of the feet of this great image, will give their power to one head in the last days, the days in which we are now living, friends. And yet, here will be the destiny of that. Let's come back down for a moment, and then let me take you back over to the shot. Shoulder. And let's try that again. Let's go for the shot over my shoulder. There we go. Now we'll zoom in on that shot at the bottom on the left side where you see that thunderbolt. That bolt, that is a rock coming from heaven, smashing the toes of this great image and causing it to buckle and fall over. And as God describes what is being depicted here in His Word, He's saying that in the last days, after the Roman Empire has given its power, the 10 kings give their power to one dictator, the Bible calls a beast, for a short time, which will be the seventh and final revision of the Holy Roman Empire under one head, the seventh head of it. It'll cause World War III to come about. It'll cause a great martyrdom of God's saints and a few other things I'll mention in a moment. But at the conclusion of it all, after they fight with their Creator, God will smash it on its toes, and all the governments of the world, as Christ returns to usher in and restore the kingdom of God back to this earth, He demolishes and gets rid of the governments of men. Now, men, of course, won't like that, and they fight God, but God's a little more stronger, more powerful than man, and that'll be the end of mankind. And same thing in Sodom and Gomorrah. Men, they thought, hey, this is wonderful, all this lust and perversion. Hey, it feels good, do it. What's wrong with it? We love it, our way, and we want it. Well, one thing wrong with it, it goes against the way of God and against real, ultimate happiness and well-being and happiness and health. And God told the one righteous man in the area to get out of there because he was going to destroy it. And he got out of there, but his wife, and he said, don't look back or I'll turn you into a pillar of salt. And his wife looked back, and sure enough, God turned her into a pillar of salt. But the rest of the nation, of the evil, sinning perverts in the nation, they have no posterity, no offspring from them, because they all died right there. They were killed in the destruction that God brought on Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, friends, that should tell you something. And there's a news story coming up after this next one that I'm going to go over that I hope you'll see how it relates to what the country has been turning to, especially with this next story I'm going to introduce to you now. A story that particularly irks me because I'm in the state of Alabama, where I grew up. And there's something in this news story. I'm going to stop it when it gets there and explain how even the news is often being presented incorrectly about some things related to this subject. I'm going to give you the head-end just as it reads from the BBC. Same-sex couple in Mobile County, Alabama, must be allowed to marry. A U.S. federal judge has ruled. 4 couples had raised the action after the local judge refused to issue marriage licenses to gay couples. The judge, the federal judge, overturned a statewide ban on gay marriage. He did this last month, but a plea from Alabama Chief Justice Roy Moore. You know, I wish I had my hat on so I could take my hat off to Chief Justice Roy Moore, and yet he's being thumbed by the federal government. A plea from Alabama Chief Justice Roy Moore telling judges not to issue licenses they're saying it caused confusion. Now, Gary O'Donnell has this report from Washington. I'm going to play just a few seconds of it, and I'll be right back.
Another day, another court being asked to rule on gay marriage. 4 couples were asking a federal court to bring a state court into line, and the judge agreed. Those marriages should go ahead. Last month, the same federal court in Alabama ruled that the state's ban on lesbian and gay couples tying the knots was unconstitutional, making it the 37th state, along with the District of Columbia, to legalize same-sex marriage.
Now, friends, you heard the way that was reported. Now, no offense to Mr. Gary O'Donnell, but Mr. O'Donnell, you did not report that correctly. Alabama is not the 37th, or as some reports are saying, the 38th, or whatever number, state to, how did he put that, to legalize or authorize gay marriages. No, the state didn't do this. The federal government crammed it upon the state, making the federal government Hitlerian, like Hitler. You know, it's the rights of states are being taken away, friends. Things are being compelled upon states by the federal government. And as in one of the stories, as Chief Justice Roy Moore, again, a salute to Chief Justice Roy Moore of Alabama. Hats off to you, sir. As he put it, as he well put it, well, let me remember, how did he put that? He put that like this. He said that the federal government, as he explained it, how he said it, he called it unlawful federal authority. And I think those are the words he used. I hope I'm getting that correctly. You know, but the federal government is acting like it has the right to rule over the states. And yet there's one thing the federal judge or judges and the administration of the United States at the present is overlooking. And that is, if the federal government can overrule a state, you're forgetting that there's a law that's higher than the federal government law. And that's the law of God, especially when it comes to the matter of marriage, which is an institution created by God. And He defines how it works. And in His Word, which is represents a higher law than the law of the United States of America, says that marriage, you read the book, friends, if you don't have one, get one. Marriage is between a man and a woman, and it has a spiritual picture and purpose to it. It's to depict how God has a plan where Jesus Christ, as the man, will be marrying His church as the woman. He's not going to create a perverted situation where you got two heads. Jesus Christ will be the head. The woman will be submissive, and yet He will give her authority too. He'll have the individual members of the body that makes up His wife reigning and ruling on His throne that will be the throne of the government of this world when He returns and takes it over and takes Satan off of it, who's on that throne now. And that's a big part of the reason why we're having a lot of this perversion and these problems that we're having. And it's one of the things that God says for the first seal of the book of Revelation, which depicts depicted by four horses, the first one of which is a white horse that Jesus Christ describes in plain language in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21 as religious deception, Christ saying, "Many will come in my name, saying that I'm Christ, that Jesus Christ is Christ, in fact, and yet they will deceive many." And God says in Revelation 12:9 that old serpent and dragon, Satan the devil, he deceiveth the whole world. Many of you know that one. That's a verse in Revelation 12, again, verse 9. And here, and okay, let me think the scripture certainly don't want to people who are doing actions that are extremely perverse and that are defined as sodomy. And we played a news story last week or two where a government official, even in some country, is being sentenced to 5 years in prison and about to go back into prison over sodomy. And, you know, and in the United States, our federal judges have thrown that term, that evil, right off the books and say, oh, it's okay. Y'all want to do sodomy? You know, forget what the Bible says about what God did to Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, friends, listen to our next news story now. And let's see, can you see this? Let me bring this forward, see if you can read this. The U.S. is at risk of a mega-drought in the future. Now, this story, I'm going to read this to you, friends. It's a story by the BBC's Jonathan Amos, the science correspondent from San Jose for the BBC. The caption with this opening photograph says, American society would need to find strategies to cope with droughts that lasted decades. All right, and on with this story. The American Southwest and Central Plains could be on course for super droughts, the story says. Super droughts, the like of which they have not witnessed in... Friends, are you listening? Stop everything you're doing. Listening to this. Super droughts like have not been witnessed in over 1,000 years. Places like California are already facing very dry conditions, but these are quite gentle compared with some periods in the 12th and 13th centuries. Scientists have now compared these earlier droughts with climate simulations for the coming decades. The study suggests events unprecedented in the last millennium may be ahead. Are you listening? Worst in over 1,000 years? Do you realize what kind of a mega-drought we're talking about? These mega-droughts during the 1100s and 1200s persisted for 20, 30, 40, 50 years at a time. And they were droughts that no one in the history of the United States has ever experienced, said Ben Cook from NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies. The droughts that people do know about, like the 1930s Dust Bowl, or the 1950s drought, or even the ongoing drought in California and the Southwest today, these are all naturally occurring droughts that are expected to last only a few years or perhaps a decade. Imagine instead the current California drought going on for another 20 years. Dr. Cook's new study is published in the journal Science Advances, and it has been discussed also at the annual meeting of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. There is already broad agreement that the American Southwest and the Central Plains, a broad swath of land from North Texas to the Dakotas, will dry as a consequence of increasing greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. But Dr. Cook's research has tried to focus specifically on the implications for drought. His team took reconstructions of past climate conditions based on tree ring data. The rings are wider in wetter years, and compared these with 17 climate models together with different indices used to describe the amount of moisture held in the soils. The caption with this photograph, friends, reads, "The soils dry because of decreased precipitation but also increased evaporation." The use of the paleo information, Dr. Cook said, allowed the simulations to capture the full extent of the natural variability that exists in the climate system, giving his team a better feel for what is normal and what is extreme. And what the group found was clear and consistent that after 2050, the Southwest and the Central Plains would likely shift to drier conditions that exceeded even the great drought epochs of the so-called medieval climate anomaly in the 12th and 13th centuries. The cause of the drying was twofold: reduced precipitation, that is, reductions in rainfall and snowfall, but also increased evaporation driven by higher temperatures leading to more parched soils. In both the Southwest and Central Plains, we're talking about levels of risk at 80% of a 35-year-long drought by the end of the century if climate change goes unmitigated, said co-author Toby Alt from Cornell University. And that's a reality, and that's a really important point. We're not necessarily locked into these high levels of mega-drought risk if we take actions. Now, this report is saying if we take actions to slow the effects of rising greenhouse gases on global temperatures. And friends, you know, one of the best ways to take action to help reverse all that is, as God says in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, the two blessings and cursing chapters, where God says, if we obey him, and then he lists in each of those two chapters different wonderful blessings, including rain in due season. That's one of the big promises. Halfway through the chapter, though, he says, on the other hand, if you don't diligently hearken to obey the voice of your Eternal and to walk in my ways and keep my commands and my statutes and my judgments, then just the opposite of all the wonderful blessings that he names in those two chapters, Deuteronomy 28, Leviticus 26. Curses, and including upon the nation, I'll break the pride of your power, and these kind of droughts like we're talking about here. And friends, let me see. Do I have? I've got some audio that I want to play for you related to this story that will explain how they're figuring some of these drought calculations. Okay, now I need to do something here. Let me come out of this for a moment. I know we're going longer tonight, but this is a couple of minutes that'll be well worth your seeing. And in order to get that audio to play for you, I've got to do a little magic trick here, which will take me a minute to do. I want to thank all of you for joining us who regularly watch Nightcast. And if you're new to watching Nightcast, it's a program that we do Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. You can tune it in by dialing up or punching in on your browser worldwatch.tv. You don't have to put a hyphen in that way. If you can get to it by going night-cast.tv, but if you're working from a smartphone, I've noticed as I've tried to do it that way, you have to switch your keyboard all over the place to get that hyphen to work, and so it's a lot easier. We're going to try to start letting you know more often. You can get the same if you're watching it live. You can also get it by just going worldwatch.tv, and you don't have to put in a hyphen that way. All right, now I'm almost there where I'll be able to play this audio for you, friends, and we're doing a lot of things new here, so we're going to set it up so I'll be able to do this a little easier in the future. Just bear with me another moment, and I think I've just about got it here. Let's see. While I'm setting that up, I guess I could play you a Prince Charles giving the weather, but We'll do that another time. Here, I've got this ready to go, and we'll switch over to that chart right after we start this. Here we go.
Yeah, water levels all around the state, in spite of rain, time low, precipitation, low snow level, to the lowest points in history. So it's really a pretty rough time.
But we have this fantastic tool that allows us to quantify it, yeah?
Right. We use the NASA GRACE mission, and GRACE sort of functions like a scale in the sky that weighs the water inflows and outflows to a region, so we can see the places that are gaining and losing water on a monthly basis. So that really helps us chart the ups and downs of water storage, and especially in California now, these days have been mostly downs. But we can quantify the numbers much better, and so we know, like a bank account, we're keeping track of how the balance is falling.
And it is. It is going into overdraft, isn't it?
It's absolutely falling. The results that we presented today showed that over the last 3 years, California has lost 15 cubic kilometers of water each year, and 2/3 of that, 10 cubic kilometers each year, are from groundwater overdraft.
So you get a sense now of precisely what has to happen in order to go back to normal. I mean, that's where we're at, yeah?
Right. So now we're able, with some of these new technologies, we're able to understand what the normal conditions are, and in times like these, what the deviations are from the normal conditions. So we can see, in our case here in California, we're around 45 cubic kilometers away from normal dry conditions. And that's just to get back to dry conditions, right? So we have a big hole that we have to fill.
Can you put that in some sort of sense that people might understand? I mean, it sounds a lot of water.
Well, it's, Lake Mead is a big reservoir, the biggest reservoir here in the United States. So 45 cubic kilometers is, that's 10 times the volume, 45 cubic kilometers is 1.5 times the volume of Lake Mead. So it's a tremendous amount of water.
You talk about groundwater. I mean, you're really maxing on a credit card there, aren't you?
Absolutely. Groundwater is the strategic reserve in times of drought. In California, we've just passed this legislation to finally manage groundwater, but that won't really kick in and have an impact. It may be a couple of decades. So in this drought period, if it continues, and we think that it will, we need to be very, very careful keeping track of that balance of groundwater to make sure that we can use it for the decades to come.
And some of the new observations that we have, particularly of the snowpack up in the mountains, because that's an important source of the water. When it melts, it comes down. We haven't previously had as good data as we have now.
That's right. So some of the measurements that we've been collecting at NASA allow us to measure things with much greater accuracy and precision. And so this airborne snow observatory that we presented today actually increases the spatial coverage of the snowpack measurements by a factor of 39 million. So, you can imagine that there's been a vast improvement. And those measurements are showing us that we've had a tendency to really overpredict how much snow has actually been in the mountains. The upshot of that is that the situation may be worse than we actually think.
Okay, friends, and I thought they might tell you this, but they didn't. I've got some notes that say scientists have assessed the scale of the epic California drought and say it will require more than 40 cubic kilometers of water to return the U.S. state to normal. The figure was worked out by weighing the land from space. The American West Coast has been hit by big storms in recent days, but this rainfall is only expected to make a small dent in California's problems. Jay Femming Letty from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, in Pasadena, California, described the current drought conditions, you were hearing him in this audio, to BBC's correspondent Jonathan Amos. My friends, next, I've got some video from today's news that both tells a story and it's kind of interesting too, and I think this will be a very good way for us to close the program tonight. Prince Charles visits ancient Saudi Arabia. A a site in Al-Ula. He's been given rare access to ancient archaeological sites there in Saudi Arabia as he continues his tour of the Middle East. The prince also met with the new king of Saudi Arabia, with whom he raised the case of the jailed blogger Raif Badawi. Nicholas Witchell has this very interesting report.
Deep in the desert of Arabia, a prince going where not many visitors are able to go in this kingdom of tight restrictions. He was taken to the sites of ancient civilizations dating from more than 2,000 years ago.
Very important site.
And to places where important archaeological excavations are taking place. Excavations which are seen by very few Westerners. Fascinating stuff for a man who's drawn to such things. But this visit has had more to it than sightseeing. Charles's meeting with Saudi Arabia's King Salman was a demonstration of his value as a diplomatic asset. Charles doesn't canvass on behalf of individual business projects for Britain. He'd find that rather demeaning. But he does press the flesh to promote Britain's wider interests. And particularly in Gulf countries, he's able to raise sensitive matters of concern to Britain. On this visit, he raised the case of the young Saudi blogger and human rights campaigner Raif Badawi, sent to prison and publicly lashed for offending Saudi's all-powerful religious establishment. For Prince Charles, the supposedly meddling future monarch, this was one intervention which appears to have gained him credit. His rather singular set of qualifications came into their own.
It's been a visit which, in a sense, has played to the prince's strengths, his knowledge of Islam, his long-standing relationship with the Saudi royals, and something that diplomats cherish, the ability to convey a difficult message without giving offence.
So Charles can leave Saudi Arabia in the knowledge that there are still places and situations in which a quiet word from a prince counts for something. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News, Al-Ula, Saudi Arabia.
And friends, before we go, I've got one more video from today's news related to this trip and what Prince Charles did there in a dance with the Saudis. Let's close out with this.
The things one has to do for mother and country. Yes, this is the heir to the throne, throwing some shapes on an unfamiliar dance floor. Dressed in traditional robes, Prince Charles joined members of the Saudi royal family for the Arda, or sword dance. They appreciated his efforts. The Arda features hundreds of men and boys dancing and singing in formation. This one in Riyadh was to celebrate all aspects of Saudi life. The prince is on his 10th visit to Saudi Arabia. An official said he's here to discuss the need for reconciliation in the region. Next stop, Qatar. Whether he'll be expected to strut his stuff there as well hasn't yet been disclosed. John Brain, BBC News.
Okay, friends, and Stephen Gilbreth here for Nightcast. Thank you for joining me this Thursday night. We're off Friday and Saturday night, God willing, and the Creek Don't Rise will be back again Sunday evening with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy. For those of you who tune in on the weekend, I'll be here on a different channel, and I'll just leave it at that. If you know where I am, you're welcome to join in on us. Otherwise, we'll see you back here, as I said, God willing, Sunday evening. Until next time, friends, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying so long and good night.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.